Dr. Frank Sullivan, you're Professor of Radiation Oncology with Galway University Hospital. Many stories have been written again today about NAMA, and there are ongoing differences of opinion from the likes of David McWilliams, who does not believe NAMA is the right thing, to others who believe it is the only solution. What are your own views on this, and with the ongoing political turbulence as well?
Yeah, I think it seems now I was struck by David McWilliams' piece this morning, where it seems to be NAMA, or some version of it, is the only show in town now. And I'm getting increasingly troubled by it, I must say. It's always bad to have a doctor talking about economics and finances, but my 2 cents worth in it is it seems to be predicated upon the absolute that we have to save the banks. At all costs, we're being told we have to save the banks. And I just wonder why. I mean, these banks are businesses that over the years, over the past several years, they've made an awful lot of money engaging in, all kinds of trading around various products in banking. And really, at a time when they should have been doing very much core banking activities like holding our deposits and lending us money, they've been spending less and less time in doing that. The lending they've been doing isn't highly reckless. And now that that's a problem for them, we seem to have the taxpayer to pick up the tab. And
there's no question that if the banks are to be made responsible for their actions and face the consequences of their actions over recent years, that the banks will all be bust. The idea of NAMA is based on a decision that the government has made that
Frank
the banks
Sullivan,
can't be allowed to go bust.
Well, is that, Frank Sullivan, you're raising that question.
McWilliams,
yes.
It's an interesting piece by David McWilliams today in the Business Post, where he says that no, let the banks go and start again.
Dictate.
And that is the fundamental decision on NAMA. Do you let the banks go? The government has decided.
Yeah, well, and I'll bring you in as well, Si, but just on that, Frank Sullivan, you believe that it's not necessarily the case that, the whole country would implode if we let the banks collapse?
I don't think so. Let's look at what they've done in the last several years. When they were faced with these debts, nobody's been fired from the banks. The boards haven't changed. Senior management...
They have. The
very little.
Chief executives are gone. The chairmen are gone.
Senior management hasn't changed significantly. Nobody has lost their jobs. None of the branches have been closed. None of the assets that the banks have internationally and beyond have been harvested to try and address the balance. So I think there's no guarantee that when we hand them over something between 60 and 80 billion euro, that they aren't going to go back to doing what they've been doing all along, which is doing other things other than banking.
And making money and making bonuses. Simon McCarthy, what are your views? Do you feel, as David McWilliams believes, that you should just let them out into the capital markets and let the markets actually dictate how they can sort out the Irish banking system, and we shouldn't be rescuing them the way we are now?
Well, I think that, I think there's two things, right? I think, first of all, there is an orthodoxy that says we can't let the banks go, which is the point Pat's making, and the point David McWilliams is making as well. That's not necessarily true, and there are some possible alternatives. As much as everybody, and I think I'm sympathetic to Frank's position here, is that we want, I suppose, some sort of something that says, God, how do they get us into this, the banks? Nevertheless, we have to be careful that in our desire for vengeance, or our desire to get, to say, look, this is what you did to us, that we don't end up in a worse situation, that economically we're worse off. In answer to your question, what do I think? Here's what I think. I think I have absolutely no idea how best to save the economy in the light of a bank collapse, because I'm not an economist, so I couldn't possibly know. And it's very difficult for people like me. And there's a good piece by Alison O'Connor in the Business Post as well today. In fact, the Business Post, not just because Pat is here, the Business Post actually got excellent stuff. There's a very good piece by Cliff Taylor explaining NAMA. Because I honestly, and this is what Alison O'Connor says, God, I really don't understand NAMA. And I'm a pretty smart person, right? I understand most things, but it's really difficult. And when you've got conflicting views, like you've got David McWilliams, who I respect as an economist, and I think he's taught a lot of sense over the years. On the other hand, you've got Alan Dukes and Garrett Fitzgerald, who I also respect.
And Alan Ahern.
And how are you? No, I'm not including him. People I listen to and respect. I'm merely saying Alan Dukes and Garrett Fitzgerald. And it's very difficult for people, for me, as a citizen of the country, to know what's the best thing to do. And the problem is that in situations like this, normally, what you do is you trust the government to do the right thing for you. But as a society, our trust in our current government has been completely diminished. So not only do we have a very difficult decision to make, but we have nobody to look to give us the guidance and the leadership that we need on this. And I think that's probably the most damaging part. Ultimately, if we had a government we believed in and we trusted to get us out of this. Whatever they told us, if they said, look, NAMA's the right thing or something else is, we could say, OK, you know what, they're making the best decision for us. But at whatever the polls are, Pat knows this better than me, for Fianna Fáil at the moment, and particularly for Brian Cowan, the Greens, the other party of government, they aren't even behind it. So there's this the Fine Gael have their position, which is anti-NAM at the moment, but then you have Alan Dukes and Gareth Fitzgerald, the old men, coming out saying, so there's absolutely no leadership being given to people, to individuals, to say what we should do. It's just dreadful.
There comes a point, though, when the government will have to make a decision on this and follow through that course of action. Someone was making the point to me during the week, and don't forget that this thing is going to be funded by the ECB, borrowings that the government will take out from the ECB. And someone made the point
assuming
to me
we vote yes to Lisbon.
That's another
so,
point.
Let's not get carried away.
But someone said to me, that the whole torture debate about NAMA in Ireland is regarded as somewhat self-indulgent in Europe, and that if another country was being offered 50 billion euros at 1.5% to sort out the mess that it had got itself into, that they would be biting off the hand
because
that was
that's such a good deal. Frank Sullivan, just before we move on.
Yeah, I think Simon just touched on a very important point. I think we have looked to everybody to look after us, and we have looked for leadership, and we have looked for our government to take care of us. And it turns out they haven't been there. They haven't been doing a very good job of this. Who's been leading in the government and regulating banks and economic issues? Who's been regulating good healthcare? Who's been providing? When we've looked for leadership, it hasn't really been all we'd want it to be. And I think it's time that maybe people took a more of an active hand in this issue. For example, if I owe the bank €1 million, it's my problem and the bank's problem. If I owe them €10 million, it's my problem and the bank's problem. But if it turns out if I owe them €1 billion, it's the taxpayers' problem. Now, I don't see where that leap should be made. I still think if I owe them €1 billion, it's my problem, the bank's problem who lent me the €1 billion. Why does it all of a sudden have to become the taxpayers' problem? And I think it is if we take this NAMA path, it will become our problem.
And of course,
and it will become our children's problem.
We don't have banks as well.
No, I understand, but I think other banks...
That's a problem for everybody.
But could another bank come in, Pat? Could a foreign bank come in and take over where Irish banks have collapsed?
I think so. The one version of this that I would accept is if a German economist was on the radio during the week, and I'm sorry I don't remember his name, but he said
Fritz.
You could value thanks Pat, you could value the assets, the toxic debts at zero, which I would agree with. If NAMA were to pick these debts up and pay nothing for them until such time as the market pays something for them. The only time we'll know what they're worth is when somebody stumps up and actually pays something for them.
But what would be the consequences of total banking collapse? Now, the thing is, we have the guarantee in until 2010. What David McWilliams is actually saying is that we shouldn't go any further guaranteeing those banks after 2010. We should let the markets dictate after that. And he says we tell the creditors of the bank that we don't want to extend the guarantee. It will lapse as it was envisaged on October 1st, 2010. And then he's basically saying let the markets decide.
Exactly. That's a run on the banks. That's a run on the banks. And a run on the banks means you can't get your money out of the ATM. That's a problem for everybody.
I don't think it necessarily is a run on the banks.
No, I don't think it's a run on the banks, Pat. I don't think that's what that means. No, come on. I mean, realistically, Pat, right, David McWilliams is hardly going to be recommending a run on the banks. The problem is, and this is back to the same, how on earth are we supposed to... Look, I actually agree with your point, right, that, I mean, it is self-indulgent of us to have this. I think it's ridiculous that I'm even sitting here thinking, do I approve of this way of doing it or not? How on earth would I know? That's why we employ bloody
That's why we have you here.
No, but that's why we have economists, right? That's why we have the Department of Finance. That's their job. They should be telling us, they should be explaining it. They shouldn't be allowing this ridiculous debate to be going on. The Greens, I've been indulgent. The Greens, typical self-indulgence on the part of the Greens.
OK, 53106 if you'd like to get in touch with me and what you think about what we're talking about this morning, particularly NAMA. Do you support it? Are you confused? Are you for it? 53106 is the text number. It's 30 cents to send us your text. Our phone number is 1890 453 106.